Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, which was shown at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The conductor was Donald Runnicles, the production was done by Graham Vick, the set design and costumes were done by Paul Brown, the lighting was handled by Wolfgang Goebel, the assistant director was Claudia Gotta, and the chorus master was Thomas Richter. Now this is the fourth overall time that I've seen this particular Wagnerian opera. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about the costumes, the production, singing, conducting, and chorus. Now, this production, as I said before, was done by Graham Vick, who I seem to notice specializes in a lot of opera productions which basically take place in the modern times, and he sort of does certain things to certain productions that sort of stray away from the original score. What I see through this particular production in Tristan und Isolde is that Act 1 started in the interior of a cruise ship, where we see a gentleman fixing up this huge spotlight, and Isolde is having her wedding dress fixed in courtesy of Brangena, and we also see other men on board as well. Also worth mentioning is that with the potion, we don't really get to see Tristan and Isolde drinking the potion, but rather using the potion as an injection, almost like how one infuses heroin or other types of drugs via injections. And when they land on the shore, they are then greeted by loads and loads of men, basically throwing flowers to Tristan and Isolde almost just to welcome them. And what I seem to notice is that after they injected themselves with that love drug, they first go into a sort of situation where they first sleep for a little bit, and then when the music swells, they wake up and finally have their first sense of sexual awakening. And of course, there are definitely moments where we see a couple of nude people on board. Well, basically, we first see a nude young woman on board, as if to suggest that maybe this might be the start of their sexual awakening. And then we go to the second act, where we might presume that this is set in a sort of mansion, motel. It's not really clear to me where this is basically set. But we also see a naked young man digging a grave, as if to suggest that Tristan's and Isolde's lives are on the line as of this point. And I know that it wasn't really that subtle in the first place, and probably it was just added there as a sort of unsubtle symbolism, but what the heck, I might as well just roll with it. I basically like the lighting set to O Sing Helnida, the great love duet sung by Tristan and Isolde, which then leads to Einsam wachend in der Nacht from Brangene. And what I also like about this scene is that, yes, we know that Melot is seen as usually the slimy, smarmy bastard of a mini villain, but in this production, we see that Melot is slightly more sympathetic. He's someone who is torn between his duties to King Mok and his duties to his very good friend. And speaking of which, we also do see that in the very first act, we also saw King Mok on board the ship, when in fact he could have just been on land waiting for Isolde and the rest of the gang. Then we go to the third act, where we presume that several years has passed and Tristan still has that wound from when Melot, stabbed him with his own sword. It's basically to symbolize that Tristan, Isolde, and everyone else in the opera are on their last legs of their lives. So it does bear some symbolism that they have grown old, they don't know whether they're going to move on with the rest of their lives or move on to the other life. It's like well, their youth has basically died out, and the flame that they once had for life is slowly dying out, especially with Tristan having his visions of Isolde, and even the scene starts out. Now, we all know that in the original production, there is a shepherd playing his bagpipes, but the shepherd in this production is mainly like an assistant doctor to Corvinal, and the entire scene is what I can say is set in Corvinal's rundown mansion, in which we see that there are a few people, like there's one woman in the kitchen who is doing all the cooking and cleaning, and then we see a gentleman who I think is about to strip himself for his next female client. Oh, and the helmsman in this scene is seen semi-nude and like still shaving, which I found rather a bit shocking. But hey, let's just roll with it. And I thought that the Liebestod was handled very well. Isolde is now aged, and now that Tristan has gone into the next life, albeit died of old age, she has no choice but to spiritually follow him. So overall, I definitely found this production, well, kind of interesting, yet I had loads of mixed feelings about it. I do like some of the symbolism used in there, and there are moments that I do like some of the more fleshed out moments with some of the characters, but there were just moments in which I kind of asked myself, what the hell's going on? But I have to say that the costumes, for the most part, were just absolutely gorgeous, though I probably could have wished that the characters of King Mark, Tristan, and Isolde would have been more dressed to the nines, because let's face it, they're royalty, they are of royal blood. They deserve to have something finer. Like, I probably would have loved to have like King Mark in a more nobler uniform, as if though that he was once in the military and now he's very much the captain of his own fleet. I probably would have loved to have Tristan in something a lot more formal, just like with his own uncle, King Mark, and I probably would have loved to have Isolde in like a ball gown as well. That probably would have been something much better than what the costumes that I've seen tonight. But for what it was worth, I definitely have to say that the costumes were really good. They fit the singers well, and they looked pretty lovely in them. And now we get to the singers. Now, before I talk about them, what I seem to notice, especially about the five main roles of Tristan, Isolde, Corvinal, Brangena, and King Marke, is that I have in my ears a lot of the great singers of the past who attempted these roles. So it's definitely a very hard job for a lot of the singers tonight to really live up to those standards. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about our main hero, Tristan, sung tonight by Stephen Gould. I have seen Stephen Gould in a ton of productions. The first time I saw him live was as Canio from Pagliacci, and then I saw him in a few other Wagnerian roles, most notably as Parsifal and Tristan. In fact, I would go out of my way to say that I have loads and loads of favorite Tristans. The likes of Lauritz Melchior, Gunther Treptow, Ludwig Zothaus, Ramon Vinay, Wolfgang Windgassen, Peter Hoffmann, Siegfried Jerusalem, John Treleaven, Robert Dean Smith, Stefano Algeri, and many, many other great Tristans of the past. And I thought that with Stephen Gould, he definitely lived up to those standards. What I definitely adore about Mr. Gould is his sterling technique. He has been hailed as one of the finest Heldentenors ever. And with his performances, past performances of Parsifal, and of course the live stream Tristan from the Bayreuther Festspiele, I can definitely say that he still continues to give the goods vocally and emotionally. He really poured out his sterling voice with such grace, power, and finesse that I was totally on the edge of my seat every time he was on stage. And his stage presence was totally measured. Not overacting, not underacting. It was totally fine all throughout. But vocally, he was totally in shape, and I definitely enjoyed his overall performance as Tristan, giving him his passion, his energy, and his overall vivacity. And then we have his lover, Isolde, sung tonight by the great Swedish dramatic soprano Nina Stemme. I have seen Nina Stemme a lot of times in live stream productions, most notably from her performances as Turandot and Elektra from the Metropolitan Opera House. She basically has to put up with a lot of my favorite Isoldes, the likes of Ella von Nemeti, Gertrud Runge, Helena Braun, Margaret Harshaw, Martha Mödel, Rosi Deli, Astrid Varnay, Birgit Nilsson, Susanne Joyol, Ludmila Forakova, Amy Schuward, Ingrid Stegar, Sigrid Kael, Gwyneth Jones, Janice Martin, Deborah Pulaski, Isolde Elchlep, and Linda Watson. And I thought that Madame Stemme's performance as Isolde, I thought was just really, really good. She has a very fine technique to her voice, which she still continues to use. It still has that freshness and that youthfulness, and the fact that she was able to have such a very long career, starting off with the lyrical roles and then finally finding herself into a lot of the big hochdramatische Sopran roles, I thought is just a huge feat that she has definitely accomplished for herself. She sang her heart out with such glory and with such finesse that I was totally engaged in her performance. I've been wanting to see this artist live. At first, I had my initial doubts, but those doubts quickly melted away as soon as she opened her mouth. What came out of her mouth, as to be expected, were a lot of fine tones and just a great sense of musicality and theatricality that she brought to the table. Then we have Kurvenal, sung tonight by the versatile American bass baritone Ryan McKinney. I have a lot of favorite Kurvenals, the likes of Josef Metternich, Falk Struckmann, Bernd Weikel, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, Eberhard Wächter, Gustav Neidlinger, Ferdinand Franz, and Hans Hotter. And I thought that with Ryan McKinney, he definitely has a very fine technique to his voice, and he has a very handsome and commanding stage presence. What I've seemed to notice about Mr. McKinney is that his repertoire ranges from the dramatic baritone roles of Escamillo and Amfortas to the more bass baritone roles of Raimondo from Lucia de Lammermoor and the monk from Don Carlo. And the way he uses his voice based on the repertoire that he has sung through many years just shows me just how much of an accomplished artist he is. He has a very commanding stage presence, and he has a very noble being to this character, and his overall technique, his overall manner, and his overall musicality on stage is of the highest order. I have to give him loads of kudos for everything he had to offer. His theatricality, his style, his manner, his swagger, everything. He really accomplished this role with such finesse and with such vivacity. And then we have Brangene, sung tonight by the German dramatic mezzo-soprano Tanja Ariane Baumgartner. I have loads of favorite Brangenes of the past. I especially love the likes of Karim Branzel, Kerstin Torborg, Elsa Schürhoff, Margareta Klose, Ina Gerhein, Elisabeth Höngen, Ebestiniani, Elena Nicolai, Chloe Elmo, Blanche Thabam, Georgina von Milinkovic, Regina Resnick, Irene Dalis, Josephine Veazey, Uta Priev, Rosemarie Lange, and Margareta Hintermeyer, and loads of other great dramatic mezzos who have specialized in the wonderful repertoire of Verdi, Wagner, and a lot of the Italian operas, French operas, Russian operas in general. What I saw and heard through Madame Baumgartner was just a wonderful instrument. I have heard a lot of great things about this dramatic mezzo online, through reviews, through blogs, through her website, and just everything in general. I was not so sure if I was going to love the sound of her voice or not, but that quickly melted away when I heard her sing her first few notes, and I was just totally engaged. She has, without a doubt, one of the finest dramatic mezzo sounds ever. First of all, she has those really nice bottom chesty notes, and her middle range is very strong. But more than anything, it's the high notes where she excels at. They are really wonderful, piercing, and scintillating. And she's also quite the stage animal. If I were to give her an animal that she was able to play on stage, I'd say that she has the grace of a gazelle. She has a very slim and svelte figure that's perfect for a lot of these seductresses, goddesses, and queens in general. She uses her figure and her voice to such an advantage that I felt like she was one of the big stars of the evening. And then we go to the role of King Mark, sung by Albert Pesendorfer. There's no doubt that I love a huge basso profondo voice singing this role. I love voices like Ludwig Weber, Gottlob Frick, Kurt Böhmer, Josef Greindl, Marty Dalvela, Karl Ridderbusch, Manfred Schenk, Matthias Höller, and Franz Josef Selig, who have sung this particularly thankless basso role and has very much made it their own. And with Albert Pesendorfer, what more can I say about this gentleman? I have seen him several times live, and he continues to get better and better and better. I continue to feel so engaged with his performances that every time I see him on stage, I am totally awestruck, totally gobsmacked of just how much of a lion he is on stage. There's no doubt that the roles I really love him in are usually the mentor and the wise old men roles and the kingly roles. He manages to give such a dignified presence as King Marka that I was totally on the edge of my seat every time he was on stage. Whether he sang or not, I was totally invested. So without doubt, I really have to say that the 5 principal players on stage did wonderfully. Special kudos really has to go to Tanja Ariana Baumgartner, who I really felt was the star of the evening. Now, I'm sure that you're welcome to disagree with me, and I'm sure that some people would also agree with me that she was also the star of the evening. I really felt that she definitely was the star of the evening because of the hard work that she puts in to such a character like Brangena. But what about the more minor roles of Melot, the helmsman, the sailor, and the shepherd? I thought that they were wonderfully sung as well. Jörg Schürner gives a very fine portrayal of Melot, giving him a great amount of dimension, and his character voice really does suit the character very well without overacting. Seth Carrico is a very handsomely sung helmsman with a very fine stage presence and a very handsome body to boot, and a very handsome countenance that he adds to this extremely thankless character role. Peter Maus, who is a veteran character tenor, makes the best of the shepherd with his fine character tones and his wonderful stage presence. And Attilio Glaza's fine, dulcet, lyric tenor voice manages to really ring throughout the orchestra, even though I would have loved to see him on stage. But as his offstage voice, I definitely enjoyed every single moment of it. So overall, I really have to say that everyone was a pro, vocally and dramatically, and the conducting done by Mr. Donald Runnicles was so well done. He is no stranger to Wagner whatsoever, paying close attention to the text, paying close attention to the music, and paying close attention to the singers especially, and the chorus from the Deutsche Oper Berlin, especially the Statisterie. What more can I expect from them? Everyone was a pro. So overall, what more can I say about tonight's Tristan und Isolde? Despite my mixed feelings about this production, I have to give everyone credit for the diligence, the hard work, and the overall dedication to the craft, whether they be the singers, the chorus members, and especially our dear conductor in our wonderful orchestra. To everyone, I felt like everyone was a pro. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in for another review. So with that said, good night, everybody.